Hello, I have a word for you. I want to share with you. Now I've been reading in the book of Ruth, and I was reading the first chapter, and there is a word that I just keep hearing literally every day for maybe like the last 2 weeks, probably longer. But without fail, I have been hearing the word harvest, and I know that God is trying to tell me that this is a season of harvest, and so anyhow, as I was reading Ruth, I get down to the 22nd verse, and it says, "So Naomi came back from the territory of Moab with her daughter-in-law Ruth, Ruth, the Moabitess. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest." And I want to go back a little bit, actually. Let me go back to the 20th verse, and it says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara." I know I said before in a previous video, it's important to know names and to look up the meaning of them. Ruth. Naomi's name means pleasantness, but she said here, "Call me Mara." Mara means bitter. She answered, "For the Almighty has made me very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has opposed me and the Almighty has afflicted me?" So I'm going to read this again. "So Naomi came back from the territory of Moab with her daughter-in-law, Ruth, the Moabitess. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest." So what I was gathering from this, it's funny because in verse 21, Naomi says, "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." And I'm like, you know what? She doesn't realize that what she brought back, the person she brought back, was actually more valuable and necessary to her life than those that she had lost. She lost her husband Elimelech. She lost her sons Mahlon and Chilion. And I don't mean to sound mean or heartless, but Naomi's sons, their names were literally meant sickly and pining away, wasting away. And like I said, names back then biblically, the names were indicative of a person or symbolic of like the person they would be, or their condition. So to be named sickly and wasting away at birth gives me the indication that they weren't expected to live very long, like they were born in poor health. And then if you go back to the 5th verse in chapter 1, you see that they end up dying at an early age. So Naomi may have been bitter about coming back to Bethlehem without her husband and her children, but she really was not empty. God had not opposed her or afflicted her. He had actually set her up to return her to the house of bread. That's what Bethlehem, Judah means, house of bread, at the beginning of a barley harvest, to receive not just food, but really a much bigger provision than she ever could have imagined. And then I was thinking, I don't know, that just made me think of the verse, Psalm 37:25. It says, I have been young and now I'm old, yet I have not seen the righteous abandoned or his children. You are probably also know righteous forsaken, or his children begging for bread. And to me, it was like, you're stepping into a harvest season. It wasn't like she was going from one bad place to another, because she was coming from Moab, right? And honestly, Moab, that's a whole history lesson in itself. But that was the Moabites. They were a what's it called? They weren't the people of God. I can't think what they're saying. They were enemies of God. Okay, they were idolatrous people. They were incestuous people. That's how they came to be. If you do a little research, you will find that Moab, which was the founder, I guess you would call, of the people, he was literally conceived from an incestuous relationship. If you go all the way back to, remember in Genesis, I don't remember the chapter, but Lot was Abraham's cousin, and Lot and his wife and his daughters were supposed to be leaving Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, his wife looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. So him and his daughters went to live in these like caves or whatever in the mountain, and they got their they assumed that they were the last people on earth. His daughters assumed this, right? And so they made a plan to get their father drunk, at night, get him drunk, and then at night they would each one night, and then the next night they would both sleep with their father. They did this. They both end up getting pregnant. Now I don't remember the name of the other one's child, but I know Moab was the name of one of the daughters, the child she gave birth to, and he was the, I guess, progenitor, if you will, or the founder of the line of the Moabites. So this was an incestuous people. They had already come from, like their relatives, the mother and Lot, came from Sodom and Gomorrah, which was an idolatrous place. So these were not people of God, okay? And so this is where Ruth was from. And so Ruth marries Mahlon in Moab, which is Naomi's son, and he eventually ends up dying at a pretty young age, I guess. I'm not sure the age, but he ended up dying before she and he had children. Okay, so you know the story. Her and Naomi make their way back to Bethlehem, Judah, and it's just so funny that she felt like she was defeated. She felt like, I'm coming back to this place empty-handed. I don't have my son. I don't have my husband. I have nothing. But she had Ruth. Like, Ruth, I'm sorry, but it's just the truth. Ruth was better than 2 sons and a husband, okay? Because not only did Ruth stick with her, and Ruth's name means friendship, but she stuck with her as a friend. She stuck with her as a daughter. She adored Naomi. She had gleaned so much information and wisdom from Naomi. And now she comes to these fields, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but now she comes to the fields of Boaz, and she's gleaning so that she can take care of herself and her mother-in-law. And so everything that she had learned from Naomi, and by following her wisdom, led her to the place where she was eventually she became the wife of Boaz. If you've never read the story of Ruth, please read it. It's it's 4 chapters. Yeah, it's a short read, so please read it. It's an amazing story. But she did not come back empty at all. God had not afflicted her. God had not opposed her. He brought her back with a woman who would help to create the lineage, or that leads to Jesus Christ himself. And not only that, but God brought them back. They arrived back in the house of bread, Bethlehem, at the beginning of a barley harvest. If you recall, when Naomi left with her husband Elimelech, it was because there was a famine in the land. Well, God said in his word, I believe it's in Deuteronomy, and I don't actually know exactly where, but he said that a famine would only come to the land when people were disobedient. So for them to be able to go back to Bethlehem, Judah, which is God's country, God's people, the Israelites, that means a barley harvest means that somebody along the way had become obedient again, and God was giving them a harvest of barley. He was giving them more than enough. And she'd heard in Moab that there was provision in Bethlehem, so she knew, it's time to go back. And so it also bears the question of, like, if you really felt like God opposed you, why would you go back? If you felt like he afflicted you and he left you and made you bitter, why would you go back? But it's because she knew who God was. And I feel like she was maybe just kind of in her feelings at that moment. But she knew who God was. She knew who she should turn to in her time of need. And that's why she took herself back to Bethlehem, Judah. And so Naomi went back a lot more fuller, if you will, than she could have ever imagined. And the harvest was so great. The harvest was so plentiful. She was able to help her daughter-in-law to become the wife of Boaz. And he literally met all of their needs, and then some. He went out of his way to become her kinsman redeemer. He didn't have to do that. So the harvest was so plentiful. The harvest was great. And I feel like God is saying that there is a harvest that not all, but that his children are going to receive, and it's coming now. I've heard some other words as well that have been talking about harvest, and it's just kind of all culminating, I guess, if you will, in my mind, that God is really bringing provision. I know that right now in the world, it looks like there is a famine going on. We're low on a lot of different foods, a lot of different supplies. The cost of stuff is going sky high because of the shortages. But I know in my heart that if you are a child of God, you are not going to go without If you recall, I said that scripture, Psalm 37:25, I've been young and now I'm old. I have not seen the righteous abandoned or his children begging bread. You will not be begging bread. You will not, first of all, you will never be abandoned, not by God. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, if you are a woman or man of God, right, you're a child of God, you will not be abandoned. You will not be abandoned. You will not be rejected. You will not be opposed. You will not be, not, well, let me not say you won't be afflicted, because we do go through affliction, but it's always for our good, right? And so Naomi lost a lot, right? But the affliction was for her good, because the way God blessed them in the end was mind-blowing. So I hope this has been encouraging for you. I hope you are looking forward to your barley harvest. I feel like God is bringing us right. We're arriving, right? We went through some hard times, but we're arriving right in time at the beginning of a barley harvest, because it's a reaping season. You've planted, right? You've planted seeds, and maybe you haven't seen the fruition of those things in past seasons, but God says the harvest is plentiful. It's time to start reaping that harvest. And Naomi and Ruth came back to Bethlehem, and they hadn't even planted any seed in this harvest, but they reaped and they gleaned so much from it. God says it's just going to just be like overflow, even for the foreigner, right? For the alien. That's what the Bible says, and I can't remember where it's at. Is it in Exodus? Is it in Exodus? Where is it? Or Numbers? I'm not sure. I'm not going to sit up here and lie. But God had a law that, you were to leave part of the harvest, part of what you gleaned, and we see that even here in the book of Ruth. You're supposed to leave some of that for the alien, and by alien I mean the outsider, the person who is the foreigner. And many of us are going to reap what we have not even sown, just because God is that good. And many of you have maybe even reaped seeds. You have sown seeds in different ways in past seasons, and now it's time to start reaping that harvest. So I don't want to go on too long, but I hope that this has been encouraging, and that's the word.